So in our reaction video for this week, we um, listened to a talk called "Inside the Mind of White Collar Criminals" by Eugene Schultz from the Harvard Business School. Um, in his interview, he talks about how he got involved into interviewing corporate criminals, and his main point is white collar crime. So, what is white collar crime? White collar crime is crime that is typically involves stealing money from a company from someone inside the company that is appointed with a very high spot, so like the CEO, an executive, the president of the company. Um, some examples of white collar crime: wage theft, fraud, insider trading, money laundering, and more. From his book, as we see in the talk that he gives examples of different cases from different people that he has studied to talk about in his book that he's written. So his book talks about different topics he wrote about, as I just mentioned. The first example that he was talked about from the interviewer asked about was about the price fixing scandal in the 60s. So that involved GE and Westinghouse executives. So what they did was they fixed the price of certain things so they could make more money. And the defense was that they shouldn't be put in jail with prostitutes and pimps. The most surprising thing about this court case was that they were hired back because they were thought to be idols within the community and within the company since they had such a high position. That really surprised me because nowadays, if someone hurts your company, you don't give them a second chance, and these companies did give them a second chance. Usually, if someone were to steal from you, they usually get put in jail, but these offenders did not get put in jail. The next thing the author gets interviewed about is Gary Becker's idea on crimes and why people commit crimes. And they say he says that they do this because it's a rational thought. The ideal of Gary Becker's crime states that people cannot commit crime because it's rational. The author is skeptical about this idea, and he gives example. He gives an example of this just happening just accidentally, not even like trying to do it on purpose. It's a Scott London case. So what happened was Scott London had from what sounded like a rough stretch at work, and he met up with the buddy after a meeting, and he was just talking to his buddy, and things just slipped out, and he didn't really think about the actions he was doing. He was just kind of talking to buddy, ranting about things that were on his mind. The next big thing here is he was asked how often do people think about, like, oh, if I do this, will I go to jail? And the Eugene said that he hypothesized people really don't think about it. And I don't agree with that statement. I think people know that they're doing things wrong, and that they know the consequences is if they get caught, that they know they will do jail time. Another reason to support his hypothesis because he said that people that commit the crimes don't feel remorse about the harm that they do, and he was surprised by that because they were saying you only feel remorse if it happens to yourself. And since what the offender in the white collar crime is doing is not hurting themselves, it's hurting other people, they can't really see that remorse. An example that he talks about is in the 60s, a bunch of people stole retirement funds, and then a bunch of 60-year-old people that are getting retired did not have retirement funds, and the people that caused this to happen felt no remorse because it didn't really affect them. He goes on to talk about many things in here in his interview he had, and the most difficult white collar crime to deal with, he says, is insider trading, because you can't relate the victims. You can't relate the victims to the offender. And he says that the true criminals aren't people who they trade with, but people outside of that. So what he's saying there is the victims aren't necessarily people that he's trading with, but it's people that are going to either lose money by this insider trading. And then he talks about, again, how people don't recognize the harm. Personally, we can recognize hitting someone as harm, but stealing money, we can't recognize that as harming somebody. An example of this insider trading that hurt other people would be a data from a credit card company. The people did data analyze trade. So what they did was they took numbers from credit cards, and then the people that did that, people that buy more food, had better stock for the company. So they sold that information to the companies to help the companies advertise and help their stock get higher. How to solve insider trading is how we talked about it. It's a lot harder now because in the past we knew who we were doing business with, but now corporations are so big that you can't really pinpoint who you're going to do business with. So you're going to meet a lot of people when you do business, and that is why people do the insider trading, because they don't think that they will see them again. Then the interviewer asked, how would people feel about if their news got put on the front page? And Eugene said, you have to know the difference between right and wrong. And we all do things right or wrong, so I don't think it's going to really matter to people. And what surprised me was that there are things that we were supposed to do that I didn't even know that were right and wrong. I know speeding. Everyone speeds. That's wrong. But I didn't realize if you buy something out of state, for tax purposes, you have to write it down in your taxes. I did not know that. Normally people know from their gut what's right and wrong, and that their gut usually tells them to stop. But in these cases, the executives in white collar crimes do not see that as right and wrong. Again, there's a lack of empathy and remorse in social behaviors because people just don't know how to recognize the remorse that they're doing or the harm they're doing people. Excuse me. And the last thing I'll talk about here that he talks about is how to avoid white collar crime. And he states that nobody in the room that they were talking to thought about, in 30 years when I make a lot of money from my job, I'm going to commit a crime. What he talked about was about humility, and so what that is really saying, like, as the higher you get up the chain, the less humility you have, and you don't ask for help. So what that is saying is, like, as you get higher up, you try to do things on your own, and that may lead to something bad happening, and then causes you to commit the white collar crime.